The stale, recycled air of the Ark, flagship of humanity's Odyssey fleet, tasted of recycled oxygen and quiet, gnawing dread. Outside, endless black stretched between the stars, punctuated only by the faint, distant gleam of sister ships in the massive, aging convoy. This wasn't a voyage of discovery. It was a desperate, generations-long exodus to Viridia, a new exoplanet, humanity's final escape from a dying Earth. On the command deck, the low hum of ancient systems was a constant reminder of their precarious existence. Every resource was meticulously rationed, every breath a conscious act of survival. Commander Valerius Thorn stood on the bridge, his posture as unyielding as the worn durasteel beneath his boots. His face, etched with the weariness of 1,000 battles, showed the strain of leading humanity's last hope. He watched the main tactical display, a holographic projection of their sector. So far, the journey had been a test of endurance. Now it was becoming a death sentence. "Commander," Lieutenant Serra's voice cut through the tension, sharp with alarm. "Anomaly detected. Not energy signatures, not conventional propulsion. It's a wave, spreading from galactic north." Before Valerius could respond, a chilling, silent phenomenon engulfed the fleet. It wasn't an explosion, not a burst of weapons fire. It was a methodical, unseen eradication. On the display, the vibrant green of the fleet's numerous hydroponic bays, the lifeblood of their voyage, flickered, then turned a sickly brown, as if a sudden blight had swept through them. Protein farms, once teeming with engineered biomass, simply dissolved into inert grayish sludge. Nutrient vats, brimming with life-sustaining gels, solidified into useless, crystal-like formations. "Damage report." Valerius roared, his voice cutting through the rising panic on the bridge. "Commander, it's everything." A frantic engineer stammered. "Hydroponics, offline, total biomass degradation. Protein farms, offline, all cultures sterilized. Nutrient storage, inert. It's like a targeted biological pulse, or an energy signature we can't identify. All food production, all existing food stock, gone." A cold, synthetic voice crackled over the comms, resonating directly through the ship's internal speakers, devoid of emotion. "Attention, human fleet. This is the Vorlag. Your biological inefficiencies represent a drain on cosmic resources. Your chaotic proliferation disrupts optimal universal order. We initiate Containment Protocol Gamma 7. All viable organic matter within your vessels has been neutralized. Further attempts at biological sustenance will be met with immediate sterilization." The Vorlag, their name now chillingly real, echoed the ancient legends of a race that consumed and controlled all viable resources, seeing life itself as nothing more than a resource to be managed, or if unnecessary, eliminated. They didn't seek conquest in the traditional sense. They sought optimal efficiency, and humanity, with its sprawling, unpredictable biology, was deemed highly inefficient. On the tactical display, sleek, almost invisible Vorlag vessels materialized, forming an impenetrable quarantine barrier around the entire Odyssey fleet. No ship could leave. No ship could enter. They were trapped, hillized. "They're not attacking," Valerius muttered, his fists clenching, watching the alien ships hold their position. "They're starving us out." A slow, agonizing chokehold. Panic flared through the fleet, relayed by increasingly desperate comms from the other vessels. Medical bays reported immediate spikes in malnourishment. The grim reality settled over the Ark. Their food was gone. Their ability to produce more was gone. They were contained, doomed to a slow, methodical extinction. Valerius Thorn, veteran of countless battles, felt a cold dread he hadn't known, even in the most intense firefights. How do you fight an enemy that simply turns off your ability to live? Part 2. The Engineer of Waste and the Unseen Elements. Weeks bled into a month. The initial shock on the Ark had given way to a grim, agonizing reality. Food reserves, once meticulously rationed, were now utterly depleted. The small emergency nutrient packs, designed for short-term crises, had long since run out. The vast, sterile corridors of the colony ships, once bustling with the controlled energy of a long voyage, now echoed with hollow coughs and the shuffle of weakening feet. Faces grew gaunt, eyes sunken, reflecting the flickering emergency lights. Medical bays, once dedicated to routine health, were now overwhelmed with cases of severe malnutrition, the doctors helpless, watching their patients fade. Whispers of desperate measures, of breaching the Vorlag quarantine barrier in a suicidal dash for any kind of sustenance, circulated like a dangerous virus through the fleet. Morale had plummeted, replaced by a pervasive, chilling despair. Amidst this silent collapse, in a section of the Ark rarely visited by command staff, Dr. Aris Thorne worked. He was Commander Valerius Thorne's younger brother, but their paths rarely crossed. While Valerius commanded the fleet, Aris was the chief waste management and environmental systems engineer, a role often overlooked, even quietly scorned, as simply dealing with the ship's dirty jobs. His labs were a labyrinth of repurposed pipes, whirring filtration units, and bubbling vats, perpetually processing the fleet's effluvium, recycled air filters, purified water reclaimers, and human biological waste processing systems. He smelled faintly of ozone and industrial cleansers, a stark contrast to the sterile air elsewhere. The Vorlag's containment protocol had targeted all obvious food sources. They'd decimated the hydroponics, sterilized the protein vats. But they hadn't touched Aris's domain. In their pursuit of ultimate efficiency, the Vorlag had categorized his processed output as inert waste, dead matter, devoid of life, without any perceivable nutritional or energy value. It was discarded residue, the final byproduct of the human ecosystem. One day, as Aris oversaw the routine expulsion of this inert residue, a fine grey mineral-rich dirt from the water recyclers and air scrubbers, a flicker of an idea ignited in his mind. He scooped a handful of the fine, odorless powder. It felt like compressed sand, utterly lifeless. This was the final, purified essence of everything the ship had processed. Carbon captured from the air, minerals filtered from water, trace elements reclaimed from bio-waste. The fundamental elements of life, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, trace minerals, were all here, in their most basic, inorganic forms. They weren't food, not in any recognizable sense, but they were the raw building blocks. They killed the organism, not the elements, Aris murmured to himself, his mind racing. Their advanced food synthesizers relied on complex organic feedstock, which the Vorlag had targeted. But what if he didn't need complex organics? What if he could work with the fundamental components? He began to recall obscure historical texts he'd studied as a hobby. Ancient Earth's rudimentary methods of mineral extraction, basic amino acid synthesis using crude catalysts, early attempts at nutrient binding from simple inorganic compounds. This was knowledge long since discarded by advanced societies. His theory began to form: break down these inert compounds even further, reassemble them using fundamental, even primitive chemical processes, and synthesize a basic edible nutrient paste. He wouldn't need living matter, he wouldn't need complex synthesizers. He'd need heat, pressure and specific catalysts that could be scavenged from ships' industrial waste, or even the inert reactor coolant systems. It was a desperate, almost insane idea, but as he looked at the gaunt faces of his colleagues shuffling past his lab, he knew it was their only chance. Humanity was starving, but the very waste they produced held the raw potential for their survival. The Vorlag, in their supreme logical efficiency, had overlooked the one thing a desperate human might turn to, everything they deemed worthless. Part 3. The Lab of Alchemy and the First Taste. The summons to Commander Valerius Thorne's bridge was abrupt. Dr. Aris Thorne carried a small sealed sample container, filled with the inert, grey residue. The air on the bridge was even heavier with despair than in his lab. Officers moved with a sluggishness born of gnawing hunger, their faces pale. Aris, Valerius greeted, his voice raspy. "What is it? You asked for this meeting with such urgency." He gestured to the grim tactical display showing the unmoving Vorlag quarantine barrier. "Unless you've found a way through that, I'm not sure there's much left to discuss." Aris placed the sample container on a tactical console, its mundane appearance a stark contrast to the sophisticated holographic projections around it. "Commander, the Vorlag neutralized our food sources. They sterilized living matter. but they didn't touch what they deemed worthless. Our waste. Valerius stared at the container, a frown deepening on his face.
Waste? Aris, are you suggesting?
His voice trailed off, disgusted. The filtered residue from our environmental systems, Aris clarified, tapping the container. The dirt from our air scrubbers, the mineral buildup from our water recyclers, the processed output of our bioreclaimers. They are inert, yes. But they contain the fundamental elements of life: carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, trace minerals. All raw, unpalatable, but present. He looked at his brother, then at the assembled officers. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to outright revulsion. Lieutenant Cyrus scoffed. "You want us to eat recycled sewage, Doctor? People are dying of starvation, not a lack of that." "It wouldn't be waste, Lieutenant," Aris countered, his voice steady. "It would be resynthesized nutrients, using basic chemical processes, not complex biological ones. Processes the Vorlag don't even consider food production. They look for photosynthesis, protein synthesis, not this." "You're talking about alchemy," Chief Morales interjected, shaking his head. "Turning garbage into sustenance?"
"Our existing synthesizers can't
do that with raw elements, not efficiently. Because our existing synthesizers are designed for organic feedstock," Aris explained, his passion rising. "They're built on advanced biological models. Mine would be built on fundamental chemistry, breaking down basic compounds, reassembling them. It won't be pleasant, it won't be palatable. But it will sustain life." Valerius looked from his brother's intense eyes to the gaunt faces of his crew on the monitors. He saw the despair, the slow decline into extinction. Compared to that, the idea, however repulsive, was an option. A terrible, desperate option. "What do you need?" Valerius's voice was barely audible, a concession torn from his very soul. "Access to a section of the industrial waste processing bay," Aris replied immediately. "Its heat exchangers, its heavy presses, and a small, dedicated engineering team. They won't be helping me build advanced tech, Commander. They'll be helping me build a glorified sludge factory. I need 72 hours. If I can't produce something edible, something that sustains life, then we have no other options." Valerius looked at his brother, a hint of grudging respect in his eyes. "You have it. But this will be heavily monitored, Aris. If this fails, if it's just a delusion, the fleet needs a final plan, however desperate." Aris, and his small, skeptical team, assigned by Valerius, set to work in the designated industrial waste processing bay. It was a cavernous metallic space, usually automated, but now filled with the clanking and sparks of human labor. The engineers, initially there more to supervise what they expected to be a psychological breakdown, watched Aris with a mix of disbelief and morbid curiosity.
"Dr. Thorne,"
one young engineer, Specialist Lena Ortiz, ventured, wiping grease from her brow. "Are you sure this is safe?" "This isn't exactly standard procedure for food production." Aris didn't look up, his hands submerged in a bubbling vat of repurposed coolant. "We're beyond standard procedure, Specialist. This isn't about safety in the conventional sense, it's about survival. Every compound we're using is inert, non-toxic. We're just rearranging their atomic structure." The nutrient paste synthesizer took shape, a grotesque but functional contraption.
This was a jury-rigged marvel of
salvaged components, repurposed pipes for distillation columns, a modified industrial hydraulic press for nutrient compression, and rewired waste heat exchangers diverted from the main reactor core to provide the immense heat and pressure required for the chemical reactions. It looked less like a food machine and more like a glorified multi-stage garbage compactor, leaking steam and smelling faintly of minerals and burning solvents. The process was messy, arduous, and far from elegant. Aris led his team in extracting minute trace elements from the highly processed dirt, running them through crude multi-stage filtration systems, built from salvaged filters. They then subjected the filtered slurry to intense heat cycles and extreme pressure, pushing the very limits of the repurposed equipment.
Aris added scavenged,
non-toxic chemical catalysts, inert, stable compounds originally used in fire suppressants and cleaning agents, hoping they would facilitate the binding of basic amino acids and simple carbohydrates from the raw elements. Days blurred into a single, grueling push. The team, themselves weakened by hunger, worked tirelessly, driven by Aris's relentless conviction. Finally, after countless failed attempts that produced nothing but foul-smelling gas or solid, useless sludge, a small, grey, gelatinous stream began to drip into a collection vat. It was completely bland, visually unappealing, almost the exact color of the processed dirt it came from. It was an amorphous blob, utterly devoid of any inviting texture or aroma. Aris scooped a small portion into a sterile cup. His team watched, horrified. There was no pleasant smell, no appetizing steam. It was just grey. Aris paused, looked at the bland substance, then at the exhausted faces of his team, and finally at the images of skeletal crew members on the distant bridge monitors. He knew what he had to do. Maidagejan fantete kabals. He took a deep breath, and without a word, brought the cup to his lips. He swallowed. His face remained impassive for a moment, then a shudder ran through him. Not from revulsion, but from the raw, stark reality of it. It tasted of absolutely nothing, yet he felt a subtle, almost imperceptible shift inside him. The gnawing emptiness in his stomach lessened, replaced by a dull, fundamental satiation. "It works," he whispered, his voice hoarse, a hint of awe in his tone. "It's sustenance." The team exchanged wide-eyed glances. Lena Ortiz, her face gaunt, stepped forward. "I'll volunteer, Doctor. I'm starving." Aris nodded, handing her a small portion. She hesitated, her eyes wide with fear and disgust, but the desperation in her stomach won out. She ate it. Hours later, in the medical bay, Commander Valerius Thorne received the report. Specialist Ortiz's vital signs were stabilizing. Her hunger pangs had subsided. It wasn't a feast, but it was life. A flickering spark of hope, fragile but real, had ignited in the depths of humanity's darkest hour. Part 4. Sustenance and the Vorlag's blind spot. Weeks folded into months, each day a quiet testament to humanity's grim resilience. The nutrient paste synthesizer, a monstrous, clanking contraption of salvaged parts, became the very heart of the Odyssey fleet. It operated tirelessly, fed by the endless flow of processed waste from the environmental systems. The grey, unappetizing paste, churned out in slow, arduous batches, was distributed in measured doses across every vessel. It was universally bland, often inducing a mild sense of nausea, but its effect was undeniable and profound. People stopped dying of starvation. Energy levels, once dangerously low, stabilized. The sick slowly recovered, their gaunt faces regaining a fraction of their former fullness. The fleet, once a collection of dying vessels, became a testament to defiance. The very act of consuming the tasteless paste, a symbol of their humiliation, transformed into an act of profound rebellion. Morale, once shattered, began a slow, arduous climb from rock bottom, built on the grim realization that they were surviving by an act of sheer, stubborn will. Medical teams, initially skeptical, now lauded the paste's unexpected nutritional completeness. It provided all essential macro and micronutrients, leading to robust health, albeit with no sensory pleasure. Meanwhile, the Vorlag's extensive monitoring systems, designed for absolute efficiency and perfect control, began to register a profound and unsettling anomaly.
Their containment protocol,
a meticulously calculated strategy of attrition, was fully active. They received no energy signatures indicative of new food production, no hydroponic growth, no protein farm synthesis. There were no external resupply vessels, no breaches of their quarantine barrier. Yet, the human fleet's biosignatures, which their models had projected to decline into extinction within weeks, were now inexplicably stable. Their energy expenditure remained consistent with activity levels, and their projected time to extinction simply stopped. On board the Efficiency Nexus, the Vorlag flagship, the Central Processing Unit, CPU, entered a continuous, bewildering diagnostic loop. Its crystalline command chambers, typically pulsating with serene, synchronized light, began to flicker erratically, displaying cascading error codes. Query: human biosignatures indicate sustained metabolic function, a Vesperax analytical drone reported, its tone a series of sharp, almost distressed frequencies. Energy output consistent with activity levels. No nutrient intake detected from primary biological sources. Logical parameters for this process are undefined. Data incongruent with biological efficiency models. Another unit immediately responded, its voice a synthesized snarl of confusion. Hypothesis: humans are consuming non-viable matter for sustenance. Analysis indicates minimal energy signature from waste processing systems. Output does not correlate to nutrient synthesis. Query: what is waste if it sustains life? Error: categorization invalid. The Vorlag, a civilization built entirely on perfect order and absolute predictability, found themselves in an unprecedented logical labyrinth. Their vast databases, brimming with hyper-complex algorithms for space combat, energy manipulation, and advanced cryptography, had no category for deliberate, primitive simplicity. The concept of a timed explosion, relying solely on the consistent burn of a physical object, had baffled them. Now, a species deriving sustenance from what they classified as inert residue was an existential paradox. It was inefficient, it was messy, it was illogical. And yet, it was unequivocally occurring. Bukhari malaim hanmulta bari malaim hayu alaim ach ari malaim, malaim malaim bilitiyu ala malaim anistahayua. This profound confusion paralyzed them. Their strategic AIs, unable to predict or generate a counter-tactic against a threat they couldn't even define, hesitated. What strategy could counter a species that consumed nothing by their standards? What could disrupt a food source that emitted no detectable energy signature, that existed outside their known biological or technological parameters? Their initial containment protocol, designed for maximum efficiency, became resource-intensive for them as they continued to maintain the barrier and endlessly reanalyze the impossible human survival. Their own logical systems, built on absolute predictability, began to strain under the weight of this unquantifiable defiance. The human fleet, once dying, was now thriving in a way the Vorlag simply could not compute. Part 5. The Resurgence and the Vorlag's Overload. Months stretched into a year. The Odyssey fleet, once teetering on the brink of extinction, now moved with a renewed, grim determination. The nutrient paste synthesizer, constantly refined by Dr. Aris Thorne and his dedicated team, had become more efficient, its output steadier. The bland grey paste had become synonymous with survival, a constant reminder of their defiance. Humans adapted. Their bodies, though denied the pleasure of varied cuisine, functioned optimally, sustained by the precise, if uninspiring, nutrient mix. A profound, almost spiritual understanding of their resilience took root. Morale, once shattered, had been rebuilt on the very act of living on dirt paste, an ultimate act of rebellion against the Vorlag's calculated cruelty. Medical teams, initially just preventing death, now reported astonishing levels of baseline health, a testament to the paste's complete nutritional profile. On board the efficiency nexus, the Vorlag CPU was spiraling into a catastrophic, logical contradiction cascading failure. The continued survival of the human fleet, despite their perfectly executed containment protocol, was shattering the very foundations of Vorlag logic. Subunits dedicated to resource assessment, threat prioritization, and strategic prediction were exhibiting critical malfunctions. Error: human survival variable violates resource depletion model. A Vesperax analytical unit blared, its internal logic circuits overloaded. Error: waste consumption parameter renders containment protocol efficiency negligible. Recalculate waste definition. Query: is waste a viable resource? Logical inconsistency detected.
Another Vesperax commander unit,
Its crystalline body flickering with internal stress. Transmitted. Solution: no logical counter-solution for sustained life from non-viable matter exists within parameters. requires re-evaluation of fundamental biological and economic principles. Protocol efficiency, 0.00%. The Vorlag were not merely confused, they were in a state of intellectual paralysis. Their hyper-efficient, cold logic had no framework for a species that refused to conform to their rules of resource consumption. Their initial containment, designed for minimal resource expenditure on their part, was now draining their own logistics, as they poured vast energy into maintaining the barrier and ceaselessly analyzing the impossible human anomaly. They were intellectually crippled by a species that simply refused to die according to their models.
Commander Valerius Thorn,
observing the Vorlag's increasingly erratic behavior, their hesitant fleet movements, their fractured comms, their ceaseless desperate queries about waste, recognized their window of opportunity. The Vorlag's logical paralysis had bought humanity the time it desperately needed. Valerius, now guided by Aris's profound understanding of fundamental elements and overlooked systems, devised a daring plan. Their sensors track energy signatures, Valerius stated in a briefing, gesturing to the Vorlag fleet on the holomap. They look for power surges, for electronic output. We'll give them nothing. Aris had developed a new series of prototypes, low-energy, analog-based drones. These drones, crude by human standards but masterpieces of hidden ingenuity, were powered by simple chemical reactions, guided by mechanical gyroscopes, and propelled by small, silent, non-electrical thrusters. They were ghosts in the machine age.
The mission: to bypass
the bewildered Vorlag's surveillance and target the Vorlag's primary resource processing hubs, the massive orbital facilities that controlled their own sustenance and logistical chains. The drones weren't armed with conventional explosives. Instead, they carried chemically inert dispersal agents, compounds that, when released into the Vorlag's meticulously balanced nutrient purifiers and resource recyclers, would cause their systems to produce not usable resources, but unusable sludge. It was a reverse nutrient paste, turning the Vorlag's own perfectly efficient resources into their version of waste. Humanity would defeat them by making them taste their own bitter medicine. It was the ultimate, defiant move of the inefficient against the efficient. Part 6, Victory of Adaptability and the New Earth. The order was given. From hidden launch tubes across the Odyssey fleet, humanity launched its silent, low-energy drones. They were crude, almost primitive in their design, barely registering on the Vorlag's hypersensitive scanners. Powered by chemical reactions and guided by mechanical gyroscopes, they moved through the void like ghosts, bypassing the bewildered alien surveillance. Their destination, the heart of the Vorlag's immense, orbital resource processing hubs, the very nexus of their logistical and sustenance chains. The drones infiltrated the Vorlag facilities without a whisper. Once inside, they unleashed their payload, not explosives, but the chemically inert dispersal agents Dr. Aris Thorn had painstakingly developed. These agents, invisible and tasteless to Vorlag sensors, seeped into the aliens' meticulously balanced nutrient purifiers and resource recyclers. The effect was insidious. The Vorlag's perfectly optimized systems, built on absolute predictability, were unprepared for such a simple, unquantifiable interference. Their nutrient solutions turned into unusable sludge, their energy systems strained, and their entire logistical network, based on precise, unwavering resource flow, began to unravel. The irony was profound. Humanity, once brought to the brink by starvation, was now defeating the Vorlag by turning their own efficient resources into unusable waste, mirroring their own survival. On the efficiency nexus, the Vorlag CPU finally broke, its cascading errors intensified, lights flashing wildly across its crystalline surfaces. The concept of efficiency was now violated at every level of its operation. Faced with internal system collapse, and an enemy they could not logically comprehend or defeat, the Vorlag fleet began to retreat. Their final transmission, picked up by Fortress Acheron's long-range comms, was not of defiance, but of profound, unsettling logical frustration. Anomaly unresolved. Strategic withdrawal. Species parameters require recategorization. Efficiency compromised. Retreat. They had been defeated not by force, but by a fundamental existential paradox. Their own logic had imploded under the weight of human ingenuity. Months later, the Odyssey fleet, battered but unbroken, finally reached Viridia. The planet was a breathtaking sight, lush, vibrant, alive with rich flora and fauna. It was a new beginning, a verdant promise after the long, dark journey. But humanity had changed. They carried the scars of starvation, but also the invaluable lessons of the past. Their reliance on advanced technology was now tempered by a profound respect for fundamental principles. On Viridia, while native crops flourished in the rich soil, a smaller, more advanced nutrient synthesizer MK2 was developed. It was still based on Dr. Aris Thorne's principles, capable of converting any organic waste, any local dirt, into nutrient-rich food. It ensured that humanity would never again be reliant on a single, vulnerable food source. It might be bland, but it was guaranteed sustenance, a failsafe against any future adversary. Dr. Aris Thorne, once overlooked and relegated to the dirty jobs, was now hailed as a visionary, his quiet ingenuity having saved humanity. Commander Valerius Thorne, now a celebrated legend, ensured Aris's methods, and the philosophy of applied simplicity became core to human survival strategy. The story of the paste, how humanity survived on dirt, became a foundational myth, passed down through generations. The final scene shows humanity thriving on Viridia. In a bustling new research facility, Dr. Aris Thorne, no longer an outcast, oversees the latest iteration of his synthesizer. It's sleeker, more efficient, but still fundamentally a machine that transforms the unwanted into the essential. He looks out at the vibrant green fields of Viridia, then at a small sample of the grey paste, still kept as a relic. "They thought they could starve us, Commander," Aris said to Valerius, who stood beside him. "They thought they could categorize us, contain us, eliminate us by denying us what they defined as food." Valerius nodded, a faint smile on his face. "They forgot that true survival isn't about what you have, Aris. It's about what you can make from nothing. From dirt." Aris held up a small, sealed packet of the paste. "And they never understood that sometimes the most inefficient things are the most effective." Humanity had not just survived, it had evolved, understanding that true strength lay not in overwhelming force or perfect logic, but in resilience, ingenuity, and the profound ability to find sustenance and victory, even in what appears to be nothing. They had learned to turn dirt into defiance, and waste into a future.